So Happy New Year, Laura. I see you're wearing black on the outside because that is how you feel on the inside. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, they're gunning for the schools now, so that's
Yeah.
peak bottom for me from a selfish point of view. I mean,
Laura, it's not selfish. It's not selfish at all. I
yeah.
mean, I haven't got children at all. I think it matters
No, I
so
know.
much that our children are being denied an education.
No, I know. I mean, what kind of, in fairness, Robert Halfon, I think, has been on the TV today going, you can't do this. All the disadvantaged kids are going to be hurt the most, which is true. My kids will be fine overall, but they won't have even gotten through their last catch-up lessons from the last disastrous lockdown. And now, as usual, because again, Boris supposedly and Gavin Williamson are pushing for them to be open. And who wants them closed? The Ayatollahs at Sage and Hancock and their handmaidens, Hancock and Gove. I mean, what is it with Michael Gove?
Isn't
It's
I,
just
do you know that is it's a bit like the question about how do you transmute base metal into gold.
uh,
It's a mystery akin to the philosopher's stone. What did happen to
I
Michael
don't know.
Gove? I've got a theory, and it's in the vaguest sense. There was the terrible time when George Osborne went on Oleg Deripaska's yacht
Oh
with
yes,
Nat Rothschild,
yeah,
and something happened there,
yeah,
and and Osborne embraced the dark side. I'm pretty sure that something similar must have happened to Gove. That
yeah.
he's been shown something. He's been taken into a high place and been shown the world by Satan, and instead of doing the Jesus thing, which
Yeah,
is what you or I would have done, he's embraced evil. There's no way around this one.
yeah,
No
yeah.
way
No,
around
he's
it.
he's terrible, and I mean this is again because I have been pushing the evil line for a lot. So there's three lines of opposition to this. If I could split them a bit, and you mightn't like this bit. The first is when people get bogged down in the numbers. Now I know the numbers are important, but like, oh, it's not this many cases, and more people will be,
Yeah, yeah,
killed by the lockdown. And okay, it's an important debate to have, but it's not critical for me. The second is, the overall, is there really a big overarching plan here, which there probably is.
yeah,
The Great Reset line, which is, they may all be true, of course, which is fine. But
yeah.
for me, maybe because I'm a lawyer and I just always think in values, is even if we were wrong in one and two, it's just evil. What they are doing is unethical. Shutting schools down is unethical. I mean, I don't care how bad the cases might be and that your hospitals might be overwhelmed. You're basically asking children to sacrifice their education for the institution of the NHS. I mean, and I went
Yeah.
through it with my blog, which I will talk about now that I laid out yesterday on our COVID crimes tribunal. This stuff is inhumane and degrading treatment, stopping people from working, stopping people from running their businesses, stopping people from meeting up with family and friends. And it can't be justified in the legal sense. This prohibition against torture, and I said what they're doing to some of the children, self-isolating them, amounts to torture because it's significant mental harm. In the case law, it would amount to torture, and you can't justify that. There's no second article below it that says, oh no, but if there's a public health emergency, yeah, you can torture kids. To really simplify for the viewers, and this is the great torture. So there's an absolute prohibition against torture, even if you have your terrorist in the corner, right, and he's about to blow up blue water, you can't torture him for the codes. Now, you might say, there's an absolute prohibition on it. And similarly, I think this amounts to inhumane and degrading treatment. So don't bother talking to me about, oh, well, you have to balance it against the NHS, blah, blah. No, it's a total prohibition. So just stop it. You're inflicting significant mental harm and on individuals, and you can't. There's no justification for it. That's my.
Yeah, well, that would be no. Listen, Laura, I'm quite excited by this because it's not often that I get much consolation from lawyers.
Oh
I
right,
mean,
yeah,
I think it hasn't been a good year for the law generally. You think about how
No.
Simon Dolan's
Yeah.
judicial reviews have been turned down for the flimsiest of reasons, like yeah, we're in the pay of the government, so we're going to toe the government's line. And then you've got the Supreme Court
Yeah.
of the USA, even worse. Chief Justice
Oh yeah.
Roberts caught on video saying he's never going to let Trump get back into power. I mean, this is the head of the Supreme Court. These guys are supposed to deal with law, and
Yeah.
and their ridiculous claim that they can't deal with election fraud because what Texas has no standing. I mean, if states don't have standing within the Supreme Court, what is the point of the U.S. Constitution? Yeah, that's how the system works. Anyway, that's by the by. But you've given me hope that there is a legal case for prosecution against Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove. And the other piece of law happiness I've experienced this year is that German, what's his name? The chap who is pursuing the PCR tests.
Well, yeah.
Where he.
So
that gives me hope as well.
Yeah, well, I think there were two important cases. I think it was in Portugal. They said you cannot use the PCR test to force quarantine. That
was good. Hats off to the Portuguese,
because they're so unreliable. And the second one, an Austrian court, said you can't impose face masks on school children. They said again it'll be similar lines. It's inhumane. It's degrading. And it strips people of liberty or dignity. It's all similar kind of language. But it seems that, I mean, this is the thing about the Human Rights Act. It's so disappointing. The biggest breach of collective human rights we've witnessed in our lifetime, and the Supreme Court won't even hear us. I know. What's the point? What is the point? It's
bonkers.
As I've said before, if you're a terrorist or a rapist, you can use the act to delay your deportation or whatever it might be. But if you're an ordinary, hardworking person who doesn't want their business closed down, you just don't have any comeback. You don't have any say.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. I had this experience over Christmas. Just another of the horrible. Yeah. I mentioned this to Toby on his show, but I'm not sure how much our audiences cross over these days, because you're so much more hardcore than Toby that I think that only the cuck element doesn't bother with this show. But so a relative of mine is quite severely disabled. He is in permanent pain. He's got his back has basically turned to chalk, so all his spine it's awful. He's in so much pain all the time, and one of the few consolations in his pain riddled life was that he'd managed to get through the Welsh NHS, which is a tremendous achievement because the Welsh NHS is just like the worst, the most incompetent. He managed to get some acupuncture treatment, and the acupuncture treatment was a welcome respite from painkillers, and it worked, and it just gave him a slot in his life where he was just had escape from the horror. Well, for the last 9 months he has not had his acupuncture treatment because of this imaginary illness, this imaginary pandemic. And another thing.
This is the thing, though. No, if we can just, this person is a real person in terms of people kind of getting over. And by the way, when I say previously for selfish reasons, what I mean is really, me homeschooling my children is minor compared to your relative having his entire, small amount of pain relief cancelled. I mean, living in pain, thankfully I've never had it, it's really horrific. And what the government are saying is he's expendable. Just deal with it. We've got bigger fish to. We don't want photos of the NHS overwhelmed. So you go and live in your pain for 9 months. You're not. It's just not important. You're just a number on literally a number on a screen to people like Neil Ferguson. And that's the whole point about having individual rights. Is that the individual counts and cannot be crushed against this greater state machine. It's just scandalous. And anyway, go on. You go on. What were you going to say?
I know. Another thing. I I didn't take communion this Christmas for the first time since I can remember. I didn't sing the Christmas carols because we weren't allowed to sing Christmas carols, and we weren't. You had to wear a mask, and you weren't allowed to sing hymns, and you had a kind of sort of semi-communion where I think they dipped the wafer into the wine, and they gave it to you, and because my wife and daughter went, and I wouldn't go. And somebody tweeted to me, "You're missing the point about Christmas communion." And actually, no, mate, you're missing the point. I wouldn't mind if right now we were experiencing a genuine pandemic, and if somehow we lived in a world where actually masks did make a difference, and if all these things applied, then I think it would be reasonable to go to church wearing a mask, having the communion, having this fake communion, not singing hymns. But we do not live in that world. We are being gaslit or gaslighted. This is a sham, the whole thing. So whenever you're participating in this charade, you are endorsing this charade. And I can tell you one thing: God does not want this shit. He really doesn't. I don't believe that I failed in his eyes by failing to go through the charade to take communion. The decent people, the noble people, are fighting against this stuff tooth and nail because our civilization depends on it. And anyone who doesn't get that hasn't been paying attention.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, you have to be, as you say, you have to be careful not to endorse it. I'm the only one at our church that doesn't wear a mask. And I can tell it kind of irks. And I have had people, I tell you, they're on it like, they are on you quick, why aren't you wearing a mask? I just say that I'm exempt. But pretty much everybody else does. And I'm not a huge fan of it. But I certainly refuse to wear a mask. It is a complete and utter endorsement of this mad policy. And although I did take communion at Christmas, but the whole thing is ridiculous. It's getting more ridiculous. And have you noticed, like, the papers now, for the next month, all they are going to do is pump out pro-government propaganda pushing for harder and harder lockdowns. There's no talk about any loosening up. Now the aim is close the schools. Can we get the schools closed? And those fanatics, those ayatollahs, as I said in Sage, are now pushing to close the schools. I mean, there'd be literally nothing left. And there was a piece in the Guardian. I mean, as I said, I wouldn't. They're making it so obvious. This is the war with Eurasia has ended, right? The first variant is over, and now we have a new war. They're literally using our 1984 as a handbook. And the opening paragraph to this Guardian article, which was written, of course, by the even crazier Independence Age, was like, we're in a completely different place than we were in April. This is even worse than April because this is a super, super duper, super, super spreading virus. So, we have to launch our new war on the super spreading virus. And I'm like, you're not even trying. Like, you're not even trying to be reasonable. It's just. But of course, the worst thing about it, and this is my despair, is how, as usual, everybody's going with it. Like the polls again, I mean, maybe they're corrupt, will be huge, oh yeah, lockdown, lock the schools down, lock us all down. I can only assume because of the propaganda from the BBC that our hospitals are going to be overwhelmed. It's just, it is. So unfortunately, I do really think we're up against it. It's the insanity. I don't think we've even reached peak insane yet. We haven't,
Laura. We haven't. It's got.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up this weird outpouring of loyalty towards our fascist regime, because at the weekend just gone. This is why I have. In the last few days, I have completely given up on the mainstream media. I will not read the copies of the newspaper that come through the door anymore, which my wife insists on. It's a habit. She's the habit of a lifetime. She likes to read the newspapers and accepts that they are compromised. I can't do it anymore. I was just looking at the glancing across at wife's newspapers, and I saw that they were full of articles in praise of Boris Johnson and the way he delivered Brexit.
Yeah.
And and one chap whose name I won't mention because he's a friend of mine actually wrote a piece comparing Boris to Margaret Thatcher.
Ugh.
And I just thought, this is, I mean, it is like living in the Soviet Union. This is the kind of thing that Pravda would have done. This is the kind of thing that North Korean state media would be producing. It's, look, nobody gives a damn about, no real person gives a damn about Brexit, not in the broader context of the destruction of our economy. And again, people who don't understand this are either brainwashed or stupid or both, because well, whatever tiny benefits we get from Brexit are nothing to the disaster that's been imposed on us by government as a result of coronavirus.
I know. I mean, the Telegraph had the gall to run, a big, practically celebration edition on Sunday, and Boris saying how Britain was going to be, brilliant. We're gonna release them all. We're going to release businesses from regulation. I mean, you're just like, you literally closed them all down. Yeah. That I would think that's the biggest regulation of all. They cannot operate.
Yes,
and
it is.
You're just thinking, this is a form of sort of ambush. This is a form of either gaslighting. They kind of switch between the two. It's all like, nothing to see here. We've set everything on fire. But look, we have this shiny new deal, and we're gonna liberate our businesses from what exactly? From a tiny regulation that they made in Brussels that, I don't know, cups have to be a certain size when the coffee shop can't even open. Really? This is what you're gonna? This is. I mean, I mean, there are no words. So I shouldn't. My mother refuses to watch this because she thinks I'm too extreme. I'm an online extrememist, according to my dad.
But, no. You are reasonable. You are the only hope.
Anyway, of course, I had lots of phone calls with them, over Christmas. And I get the photographs. They went around to my brothers, and I get the photographs, and they're wearing their mask. They were going to stay for dinner, and they're wearing their mask, and they have their dinner and their takeaway. But they decided then not to stay, that they would just visit, for a short amount of time, and then take the dinner that my sister-in-law had cooked for them, in fairness, and then bring it back to the house. And I'm just like, obviously part of me is, you just I was like, if the Irish government told you to stand on your head and wiggle your toes, like you do it. You would literally, you would do it, because it's just, and again, these are reasonable people, and it just shows me then what we are up against, because they're so invested. And of course, the longer it goes on, then they do that whole, there's a specific name for it, isn't it? Well, we've sacrificed so much. And we're right at
the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. And so the longer it goes on, I mean, I can understand why people would think that if you're a bit older and you become invested in it, you don't really want to think you've torched the last 9 months of your life for nothing, right? You don't want to think that you've denied yourself the opportunity to see your grandkids for nothing. So they can just feed them on this, for the vaccine's just around the corner, and it's only a couple of more months, just hang in there, and it'll all be over. But I don't think it's. Do you notice how it gets further and further? So it was going to all be over by Easter, and then that Hancock put in over a Christmas. It's like, I mean, 2022 will look very different. What's that?
Yes. What? Where was 2021? Where did that go?
All of 2021 now, really? And again, people are still.
Yeah.
Oh well, what are you going to do?
Well, so buy Bitcoin, I should think. Laura, but before I want to launch you into what I know will be a spectacular rant when we talk about Neil Ferguson's interview in the Times. But before that, I wanted a brief comedy interlude from our last Chinwag, number 7.
Yeah.
Somebody called Mark Shepherd has said, May I ask a question? If all this that you talk about is true and is a big conspiracy, then I think the decent people of this island will rise up and confront this. Really? However, if this again proves to be the same doom and gloom spreading done every time there is a crisis in this country or the world, and again your assumptions are proved wrong, will you publicly apologise to the subscribers and those that have watched your broadcast? Laura, no. I don't know who this Mark Shepherd is, and I don't know whether it was Christian
Mark.
charity.
No.
I've said, so I replied to him, but not you, Mark. You're just going to sit on the fence with splinters up your bottom, hedging your bets, not taking any action, but ready to judge those braver, better informed people out there, giving you fair warning of what's coming. I think you need to man up. God, I hate being told to man up. Not that anyone does very often these days, but I think he deserved it. What a pathetic remark.
Yeah. Oh no.
Now.
Yeah. No, the Neil Ferguson interview in the Times, which should be referred to as a confession. It wasn't an interview. It was a confession, basically. Well, you wrote the piece in Breitbart. I should have done it, but you did a great piece, of course, which I did tweet. So, well, let's just do a brief one now for the viewers. Let's not assume. So Neil Ferguson gives his interview to who? The Tom Whipple or something in the Times. The softest interview, a disgrace to journalism.
Tom Whipple is. The science correspondents are rubbish. They are so bought and paid for by big pharma.
We really need quotes, James. We need quotes. And he starts off with it was going to be terrible and people didn't realize how bad it would be. And then they talk about, and then China lockdown. And the discussions at Sage were like, same as what me and you would have said. Well, we can't lock down, do a Chinese lockdown, a Chinese communist lockdown, because
we're not communists.
We're a liberal Western democracy with individual rights. Yeah. And then his words were, but then Italy did it. We didn't think we could get away with it, direct quote, we didn't think we could get away with it, but then Italy did it and we realised we could. Well, dear viewer, you only use the words get away with something when you know you're at least acting immorally. And then towards the end of the interview, he brings up China again. And of course, I tweeted, what the interviewer adds in is almost worse than what Ferguson said, because as Ferguson goes on, and then the interviewer goes, oh, well, we wouldn't hesitate. Lockdowns are now orthodoxy. That was added in. And if there was another pandemic, we wouldn't hesitate to lock down. So they've already locked you down, people, viewers, in case you don't think this is a conspiracy. They've already locked you down for the next pandemic. That's not even up for discussion, according to the Times, because lockdowns are now orthodoxy. So,
and also, Laura, I mean, the bar for a pandemic is now set so low because, of course, the World Health Organization redefined pandemic in order to make it much, much milder, that there didn't need to be a kind of massive death rate to be proved. So anytime they feel like it now, they can declare a pandemic.
No, you're actually even more. But no, I know. And as I tweeted yesterday, because people don't seem to understand that this is about values, in that even, this goes back to you, Mark. Am I going to apologize? Are you going to apologize for all the suicides that you can't undo because of this, and all the cancelled cancer treatments that you can't undo? So the goal of people, say lockdown does end in September 2021, they go, now you are wrong. You're going to apologize. They said 3 weeks to flatten the curve. I said don't legitimize lockdowns as a form of governance. So no, I will not be apologizing. So this is a long rant. So at the very beginning, the reason I opposed the lockdown, I said when others on the right were saying, let's just go along with it. It's 3 weeks to flatten the curve. I said, do not legitimize lockdowns as a form of governance. It is not a legitimate tool for a democratic government to use. So even if these lockdowns end, because then people don't understand, again, in law, precedent is so important. If you set a precedent, right, it's impossible to row back from it. So this is now a precedent. This is now a legitimate tool in whatever government's arsenal for locking down in a pandemic, as you say. So, even if we'll never get back the value that you cannot lock down citizens in a liberal democracy. You're never getting that back, no matter, even if the lockdowns do end. So our value system has changed so fundamentally, namely that you can crush individual liberty, you can crush individual rights, you can use communist tools in Western democracies. These are all now considered legitimate tools of governance, and nothing will undo that. I don't think we'll ever recover from this. I don't think we ever recovered from the First World War, and I don't think we're ever going to recover from the way the value system has changed due to these lockdowns. And then they're getting their knickers out. Oh, there's 40,000 cases of, we have to go out and for a virus that you have to go out and find. That you have to go out and find. That's how bad this virus is. You know, so what else can be said? It's a complete disaster. And as I said, lockdowns are now the default position, right? It's the status quo. So people go, oh, well, what would you suggest? No. You're proposing crushing individual rights. You have to justify your position. I don't have to justify liberty. That was a given. But now lockdown's the status quo. People just don't understand how unbelievably fucked we are. Sorry.
Do you know what lots of people are thinking right now, Laura?
What?
They're thinking, I wish Laura were my prime minister or my president, depending on what country they're from. It's true.
I don't want to be
it's true.
James. I'd rather be playing my piano or watching a movie with the girls. I genuinely, I would rather not be doing this. Whereas a lot of other people, you know, they like a lockdown because it keeps them, they can keep writing articles in all the Karens. There was a fair few Karen articles in the Sunday Times, by the way. How very dare you have your adult children down to Christmas. So this is all, you know, that keeps them in business. But, you know, I'd rather not be here, to be honest.
Listen, nobody wants this stuff in their lives. I keep quoting it because it's just so good.
Yeah.
And I feel, and I'm sure you feel the same way. You remember that scene in the Fellowship of the Ring? There's a exchange between Frodo and Gandalf, and Frodo says, "I wish it need not have happened in my time," said Frodo.
Yeah.
So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a few of us are coming round to the realization that this is one of those moments in history that we never expected we'd have to live through. Yeah. Because we kind of believed in that sort of Francis Fukuyama fantasy that we'd experienced the end of history, that sort of liberal democracy had reached its apogee, and from now on we were just going to coast in this, you know, free speech was a given.
Capitalism had won.
Not having no lockdowns was a given. None of this stuff. When you and I were at university, this year would have been like, you wouldn't have believed it. I mean, if somebody had written a dystopian novel about it, you'd have thought, well, that's a dystopian novel. That is not a portrait of any world that I'm ever like to live in. And yet here we are.
No, I know.
And we have to.
And the only thing also in terms of how few we are in the Lord of the Rings, you know, it may well come down to a great big battle. I wouldn't rule that out. But I think in one of the, I forget some of them, but I think in the end, isn't there? There's the huge army of orcs, right? And there's like, say, 1 million of them, right? There's a million. They're so outnumbered. And Frodo and the gang, there's like what? I'd say the equivalent of literally about a 10,000, right? They're completely outnumbered. This great line is, you know, we are so few, and they are so many. And currently that is the current state of play. Of course, then the army of the undead did come along and help them, which may well be the saints. We may well need the saints to rise up and help us when the time comes. I rule nothing out. So, you know, I mean, Lord of the Rings, in terms of getting out of this, may well have to become our handbook. But I mean, things are bad, and it's certainly, I am afraid, a lot of it has to do with dying masculinity, how few people are willing to man up. You know, how I see loads of men just trundling along there with their masks, and you're just like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Because people are probably willing to go along with the Amazon and the Netflix. Oh, now people who like this. Now, James, there are people who like lockdown. I mean, you said none of us want to be here. I mean, yeah, you and me don't want to be here. I think a lot of people like lockdown. You get to be sanctimonious, judgmental, grab the high moral ground wrongly, you know, because, oh, that person is leaving their house. How dare you? Right? There's the narcissists as well, who just like to ruin other people's joy. And there's plenty of them around. That's a whole other chapter. Narcissism, how you know, if you see somebody having a good time and somebody else wants to crush that, there's loads of people like that. And now this is their time. I get to crush Christmas. I get to cancel all the birthday parties. And then I also think, James, I mean, I just think even your regular people are happy not to socialise and make an effort. I mean, that sounds bad, but I reckon there's a fair few men out there going, don't have to see the in-laws this time. Don't have to see her. She's a pain, right? Especially the working from homers, the middle class, white collar people who are probably pushing this. You know, they work from home. They don't have to, okay, they probably miss going to the pub a little bit. But, you know, there's loads of, you can get stuck in your own comfort zone, you know, and I think there's a lot of that right now.
Did you read? I tweeted this out yesterday.
Oh, go on.
Somebody tweeted some brilliant tweets about the failure of the intellectual dark web. Did you see that?
Oh no!
Do you remember that? Do you remember there was this thing?
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find. Do you remember there was that thing called the intellectual dark web, and it was these people on the left and on the right, Jordan Peterson and all these kind of blog hosts and stuff, and some were academics, and some were on the left, some on the right, and they were kind of challenging this politically correct consensus. Yeah. But somebody pointed out these people have been nowhere in 2020. These people who were supposed to, whose intellectual rigor is, I mean, okay, Jordan Peterson's been ill, but he wasn't the only member of the intellectual dark web. But where are these people? Where have they been? Where have our fellow conservative commentators been in the biggest theft of freedom in our lives? And it's not just that. It's not just the coronavirus thing. I mean, we haven't yet mentioned my other pet topic, because intimately connected, the stolen election of Donald Trump. Now, I've noticed, because I spend a lot of time on Twitter looking at what conservative Americans are saying. And I've noticed that even some of the hardcore conservative commentators have now gone to the stage where they're sort of more or less conceding the stolen election to Trump, to Biden, even though, for example, in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, there were more votes cast than there were actual people living in Pennsylvania. 200,000 more votes cast. Now, surely every conservative commentator, every left-wing commentator should be saying, this cannot be allowed to stand. This is wrong. And instead, you've got even the sort of more hardcore conservative American commentators I follow on Twitter, turning their wrath on those few of us left who are trying to find avenues to victory for Trump. You know, they're turning their wrath on the people who are still holding out hope. Now, that seems to be a complete rejection of their responsibilities, both as journalists to the truth. They should be tweeting madly all the time and writing articles about how this cannot be allowed to stand. If this is allowed to stand, democracy fails and the world fails. That's all they should be saying. They shouldn't be saying, oh, look at what this mad crazy Trump person has said. How ridiculous. Don't they realize that they've lost? They shouldn't be saying that.
No, I know. I mean, I haven't been following the American stuff, and I haven't been even following the American blogs as closely. I mean, I've said to you before that Mark Stein is you. I don't know how familiar you are with him. He's
I like Stein.
He used to write for the Telegraph and Spectator.
No. Is he still on side?
Oh yeah. Did I send you his whole podcast? Yeah, he's completely like this election was stolen. He's also very funny. He would be now pretty much as close to you as you can get. The election was stolen. But he says, and I think it's the same as the coronavirus thing, you know, to actually, it's just too scary for a lot of people to believe that these things are true. You know, that the election was stolen, that it's so they'd rather just go along with it. Because
Nora,
yes.
I'm an old-fashioned sort, like you.
Yeah.
And I was brought up reading the kind of books. My parents didn't force them down my throat. They were probably in the library at my prep school or something. But they were books about, you know, Biggles, for example. Or books like Beaugest. Or books like, I don't know, Ivanhoe. I saw the movie. I never read the book. But for me, being a coward
Yes.
Not doing the right thing is a complete failure of you're not a man.
No, I know.
If you don't stand up for these things, you have failed. You might as well not exist. And I think every man should think that, and women in a different way. They should think what they think. But there was an incident when this happened to me, when I was out hunting, my last hunt, and I was stuck in this sort of trappy field, and there was this fence that the people I was with were jumping, because otherwise you'd have had to go a long way around and you wouldn't have kept up with the fox wherever that was and stuff. And I didn't want to do it. I was absolutely shitting myself. I was not suitable, and I shouldn't have done it. But I thought, you're a man. This is your job. You've just got to, you've got to grit your teeth, man up, and do it. And anyway, the result was I had a terrible accident, and my horse hit the wire, and I fell off and busted myself up, and it was horrible. But the point was, I did the manly thing because I felt that was my duty. Why don't other men feel like this? What's happened?
Oh, come on. I mean, this has been nearly the last 30 to 40 years. The state of Western manhood has been on the has been going downwards, and things like courage I mean, that's a very good example. But I mean, courage is so lacking now. I mean, in terms of the media, people are just not willing to stand up to what they perceive is the majority view, even if they themselves believe, innately kind of are with us, say. It's just too scary to sort of stand up against a big guy, or if you're at Twitter, you're on Twitter, to be just monstered by like thousands of people online. But even setting aside sort of the Twitter sphere, for instance, you get loads of, look, I'm not saying the women are great, but you get loads of men now that like don't want to be fathers because that's just but that's a form of cowardice. You're not willing to make the sacrifice. You're not willing to make the investment. You're not even willing to settle down with someone because, nobody's perfect. And I might actually have to compromise. And, I mightn't get to watch all the Netflix programs that I really want to do. And I might have to do a job I don't want to do. It actually takes courage to, do what you was taken for granted sort of, in the 50s to, first of all, marry somebody and have children, and loads of men can't even be bothered to do that. And things like courage and duty and just doing the right thing even though you don't want to do it, these are foreign concepts to a lot of people. I mean, look, we've had probably the last 3 to 4 years has all been about the safe space. So if you want to be safe, and that's all COVID is about. Previously, this is from a generation of some men who didn't want to have threatening words or ideas put to them. So how courageous do you think they're going to be if the big bad virus that threatens them in no way comes at you? Or then after that, the government stops you from going to work because of the fake big bad virus. It's just not unfortunately, it's just not a courageous generation. I mean, they're for lots of different reasons, they are definitely the least resilient I think we've seen for a long time. Again, which makes this COVID thing so dangerous for them, because they will just give in to despair a lot easier than you and I say would. They also have a lot, less. We went through this in the other podcast. If they're simply too young to settle down, if they just have a lot less going on. So. Despairing and suicide and things like that, like it's dangerous. And this generation is unfortunately probably one of the least resilient we have ever had. They've had an incredibly, privileged upbringing in terms of materialism, but in terms of what values they've been given, like, as I said, courage and duty and sacrifice, that is questionable. That they are not values that have been sort of, I think, necessarily handed down to the next generation. It's bad, and that's why we've had such little pushback, I think.
There was a very good example of this recently. The story about the master at Eton, Will Nolan, who got sacked for making his video What he was doing was challenging the culture that had been imposed on the school by their new headmaster, Trendy Hendy. And
Yeah.
Trendy Hendy is a wet.
Yes.
He's quite literally a social justice warrior. He
Yeah.
was imposed on the school by the provost of Eton. A lot of this stuff hasn't really come out because a lot of people don't know the inside story. It's been misreported. The
Yeah.
provost of Eton, Lord Walgrave, was a wet from Margaret Thatcher's cabinet. He was dripping wet. One of those kind of toffs who wants to undermine the system, wants it all to go woke. So Walgrave imposed Trendy Hendy on the school, and Trendy Hendy brought in this woke agenda to the school.
Yeah.
And for example, the boys were lectured by Laura Bates of the Everyday Sexism Project. She's just this random girl who found validation for herself by embracing fourth wave feminism and then dumping it down the throats of hapless schoolboys who were forced to attend these stupid lectures. And there was no counter to it. So this poor master, Mr. Nolan, was trying to kind of provide a counter to that. But the broader point I'm making, why it matters, it's not just an incident at a kind of toffee public school that you can't afford, so why should you care?
Yeah.
What it is ultimately is, the Duke of Wellington famously said that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton.
Yes.
And he understood that not just Eton, but all the public schools, they created this ethos of service and sacrifice. In return for your privilege, you had a sense of noblesse oblige. You went out there, you might become a district commissioner in sort of 10,000 square miles of hostile Sudanese territory, and you kept the flag flying and kept sort of order and decency and so on. These were the values instilled in these boys. And when you go to Eton, you look at the roll of honour. The number of boys, more Etonians died than at any other public school. I mean, obviously it's a bigger public school, but they probably won more Victoria Crosses. They lost more boys in both world wars. And they're very conscious of that because they wander through the cloisters on the way to chapel and they see these on the engraved in stone or in wood. In a trice, in the space of 5 years, one cultural Marxist infiltrator in the form of Trendy Hendy has managed to undo 500 founded in 1440. So how many years of tradition is that? They've just absolutely buggered it up, and it's very hard to get that. But you talk about precedent; it's very hard to get that back once precedent has been established for boys being told that they're sexist pigs by some random blonde girl called Laura Bates.
No, I know. Look, I'm glad you brought this up in terms of, because it is all linked to the COVID thing, in terms of wokeism and how it has spread so quickly through all the main institutions and all the corporates, because the corporates are completely signed up to it. So what you have to understand is the majority of people are obviously not woke. Okay, it's only a tiny minority, but the tiny minority make the rules. And unfortunately, and then eventually it trickles down because people compromise. So if you're, mid-level in a corporation, but you want to get to the higher level, well, then you have to, you have to pay tribute, right? Because that is, wokeism is the new creed. Look, I think it's incredibly dangerous. I mean, there's a number. So, and this, if you compare it to how Christianity spread, right? So there's obviously a big debate in terms of how, I'm sure it's a huge debate in terms of how Christianity managed to spread through the Roman Empire, right? And that it was oppressed. And then very, very quickly, in terms of historically, it became the key religion. And one of the theories, again, is that, yes, on the ground, it was still all pagans, but Constantine converted. And once you get, the big guys at the top, everybody will eventually start converting. They mightn't be true believers, but they're social converts because they know this is what is necessary to get ahead. And you're going to get essentially exactly the same thing now. So, as you say, when you say, oh, well, people say it doesn't matter, it's only Eton. No, it does matter, because these are the key institutions. And if it's happening at Eton, it will spread across all the main key institutions, which I'm afraid have all the big influence to eventually it does trickle down to the massive population. And then they're all sort of, woke believers. I mean, the scandal about Eton is, again, from my point of view, be like, you have a rich Christian heritage of imbuing Christian virtues, including courage and kindness. So you don't need Laura Bates in there to tell all the boys that actually there shouldn't be, locker room talk, or you shouldn't treat girls badly, because you'd already be teaching them that, about human dignity, and that you should be kind to people, etc., and that you should protect the weak. And I'm afraid women are the weaker sex, so you can deal with that, Mr. Viewer person. So if they were doing their job properly, there is no need for her to be in there. Because it's all covered in Christianity in a much better way anyway, long before the woke guys came along. So I know, look, it's very depressing, and it spread, as you said, so quickly. But that's all it takes. It just multiplies, and then you get, as I said, you just get people who just go along with it because it's just too much hassle, right, not to go along with it. And that's exactly what happens. Or if you want to get ahead, you have to go along with it, right? You can't speak out because the head guy, and you already don't have any courage, as we've already spoken to. So it's I mean, a lot of Christian institutions have a lot to answer for, in that they haven't provided much of a rearguard action to this, and a lot of them have just surrendered because it's the easier thing to do. But it's it's the same thing. It's just easier to go along with the crowd.
I think we've almost gone back to the era of the early church, Laura. I think I think lots of people I know are sort of turning to God, but they're not finding God in the established church.
Yeah.
Because the established church isn't interested in God anymore. You get exceptions, you get little outposts, but generally, the church has failed us. The fact that the church hasn't said, the church should have said, we are keeping the house of God open throughout this pandemic. We're going to unlock all the churches. We're going to hold services, and if you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to. We're going to carry on because that's our job. And they haven't been doing that. They haven't been but generally, do you not think that the ancients were obsessed about this? And I'm sure they were right. They associated eras when the gods were dishonored with periods of cultural decline and disaster and chaos. And I think we're living through such times now that the absence of God, the decline of Christianity, has the melancholy, long withdrawing roar, has led to this world in which people have substituted their own fake religions, as sort of Gaia worship and secular religions.
COVIDism.
COVID is.
It is a religion, and this is what they're going to worship, but they're really worshipping themselves and their own preciousness and their own precious health. I mean, you should take care of your health and things. That's absolutely a requirement, but you don't ask, you don't trash your entire country for it, especially when it's essentially a bad flu. No, it's complete COVIDism. I mean, it's just big government. They just love big government. I love Big Brother. Big Brother will keep me safe in my safe house. And we'll just wait here until. Oh yeah. So while we're talking about safe, so it is all linked. It is all linked. So I watched one of the few things. I watched the Ripper documentary on Netflix. Don't know if you saw it. Mm-hmm. So the documentary on the Yorkshire Ripper, not Jack Ripper.
Oh, well, and
it's a bit PC here and there, but it's good overall. And then they covered the Reclaim the Night marches. Okay. Because the police officers, when things were getting really bad, the police officers obviously told all the women, said, right, to be safe, you just actually have to stay at home. You just can't go out at night. Right. So the women, I think, understandably were like, no, why don't you make the street safer? Right. So this was don't go out at night, save the police. Right. Save lives. This is the original. Don't lock yourself down. Save your lives. Save the police. Now, obviously, the logical thing then was when feminists, they were right on this, were like, no, we've really fought actually to go out and go to the pub and stuff. We're not going to be locking ourselves down. You make the street safe. So they went out on a march and they said, we're reclaiming the night. And why don't you curfew the men? Don't be curfewing us, right? Don't curfew the men and stuff. And I was thinking, man, fair dues to those radical feminists. They're all young, obviously. I reckon a lot of them now but they wouldn't hide from a knife-wielding murderous maniac. A lot of them now will be hiding in their houses from a bad flu. Those exact same women 30 years ago, when they were 19, they took to the streets and refused essentially to be locked down. And that was just at night. They refused to be locked down. No, I'm not hiding from the hammer-wielding maniacs. Are right now sitting at home, ordering in their Waitrose because the big bad flu is out there.
Do you know what I think the diabolical genius of the COVID religion? This is the thing that's given it its power, and it's no coincidence that SAGE mostly comprises behavioral scientists rather than actual scientists. And it's this. The way they have embedded in this religion this clause of sort of pathological altruism, whereby you're not going through these rituals for yourself. It's not for you. It's for the NHS. And it's to protect your elderly granny. Relative, your granny, whatever. And everyone, all the bedwetters, they always quote. I've heard it throughout Christmas.
No, you're right.
I want to go to this Boxing Day lunch, but I can't because my cleaning lady or my mother or my so and so has these underlying conditions, and then they'll dwell on the underlying conditions, and they'll talk about the cancer or whatever. Well, lots of people have got underlying conditions. We got on with life before. And but suddenly it's okay. You're one of the good guys because you're wearing a mask to protect the NHS and protect other people, and therefore you can do what you like. You're bulletproof. You're morally bulletproof.
No, it is absolute genius. You're right. It's complete genius. It's an invisible virus, so you can't see it, but yet it makes everybody else enemies. It can change, right? It can change all the time. So it's a constant war. We'll be doing this, forever, basically. And
I say what it
people
knows.
say, you can be reckless. Can be reckless with your own life, but what about all the other people? And then they're still pushing this asymptomatic thing, which has been completely debunked by the British Medical Journal. If you feel fine, you are not a carrier. And they keep, even if you're well, act like you're sick. As I said before, no, that is a form of, as I said, Munchausen disease by proxy. If you're well, you're well. If you're well, you're well. If you're not well, that's different. But and now, so even if you're well, you still have to stay at home because, you could be a secret carrier and infect other people. No, it's complete genius. It's foolproof. It's a foolproof plan. I don't know who thought of it. It's genius.
It's so clever that it can do things like when it knows that the government needs justification to extend the lockdowns or cancel Christmas, whatever. What it does is it cunningly mutates so that it becomes 70% more infectious. It mutates, doesn't it? It becomes a mutant. A mutant virus.
Well, they're really saying is you're the mutant. Really, you're the mutant. So it's making the general populace both sick and now mutants. I mean, look, it's sick. The people behind it is demonic. The people behind this are completely sick. I just, you don't know how long it's going to go on for. No, it's complete genius. It's so flexible. It can come up and down when it wants to. So they managed to say it's more transmissible, but it's not more fatal. In which case you'd still be saying, so what? Okay, so we'll just get herd immunity quicker. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Well, no, but don't forget the WHO has actually redefined herd immunity, so it doesn't actually exist anymore. You don't get. Only by vaccine. But Laura, lots of people are going to be, their heads are going to be, probably the necks are going to be injured. They're going to spend the next year having to try and book osteopathic treatments that they can't actually go to because we'll be in tier 5 by then. But they've been nodding so furiously. But have we got anything we can round off by cheering people up? What did you get for Christmas? Did you get anything nice?
I mean, I got lots of nice things. I can't remember. Yeah, I mean, it was. Look, as I said, in a way, as I said, this lockdown I think can make people selfish. Day to day, James, I'm fine. I could totally do the sanctimonious, oh, look, she's leaving and she's leaving. I'm happy here with the whole family. I do think it kind of makes you a bit socially lazy. You don't have to make an effort with people. But I just think it's wrong what they're doing. It was all good. Unfortunately, I do think this is very bad. The vaccine gives me no hope because they can easily,
No.
once they run the vaccine out, they can easily say, oh, it's mutated now, sorry, you can beat the vaccine. Nothing stops them from doing that. Basically, the government now there are no limits on the government power, which to me is the scariest thing anybody can ever say to me. Anything goes. There's no limiting principle to what they can do. And I mean, you can do whatever you want with a vaccine, right? It can spread quicker. It can be more. It can be, maybe it'll kill you more. Maybe it'll kill you less. It'll spread with kids. It won't spread with kids. They can do whatever they want. They can do whatever. Oh, the Nightingale hospitals. I know you want me to finish positive. So, our hospitals are being overwhelmed, but they're decommissioning the Nightingale hospitals. Could it have been that they built those Nightingale hospitals knowing that they would never have the nursing staff to go in there? Was this just another way to scare the population? You don't want to end up out there in the Excel Centre. Like, who's made all the money from that? They were completely pointless. They built them and then they've just taken them down.
Oh, and no Laura, please let there be criminal trials. I mean, this is just fraud, isn't it? On a massive scale.
I mean, fraud implies lying, and they don't even try anymore. They act. This is the thing. They're so blatant about it.
Laura, can you clear up one thing for me as a lawyer, because I'm slightly worried about this.
Yeah.
The law ought to operate independently of whichever government is in power, shouldn't it? It should be, and yet I'm not getting the vibe that that's happening anymore. Not in the US, not in the UK even.
Unless someone takes a criminal prosecution, unless someone lays charges, unless another government comes in and says we're setting up a public inquiry. I mean, there may well be a public inquiry into the care homes. I mean, Amnesty, which I wouldn't be normally a big fan of, have already said that basically what went on in there. I mean, they refused admission from nursing homes into hospitals and dumped people who were infected with COVID back to nursing homes to protect the hospitals. The only reason they're doing this is they don't want photographs of NHS hospitals overrun. And they will do whatever it takes to stop that happening because it's bad PR. And if it means putting infected people back into nursing homes, so be it. That's literally all they will do. It's not about saving lives.
But Laura, I can't see. You talk about a new government coming in.
No, I
Keir
know.
Starmer is infinitely more compromised than even this corrupt rogues gallery of dodgy, of failed politicians. So I don't hold out much hope there. It's going to be a long time, but they're going to be old men if and when these trials come.
We hope. I mean, it would take me and you to kind of run as MPs and then say, right, we're setting up a tribunal.
We're not doing that, though, are we?
No, but or again, there's huge public pressure for it. But hang on. I'll end on a good note, okay? Now, unfortunately, I think the zoos are running low on food for the animals. Didn't you do a podcast on this?
I did a podcast on Cotswold Wildlife Park.
Yeah.
I met the rhinos.
Obviously, the punishment when our super duper very quick COVID crimes tribunals will be, we will just feed Matt Hancock and Sage and the rest of them to the zoos that have been run short on food. So we can just put Matt Hancock in the lion's cage and in the lion's enclosure, and we can see how he gets on. That's the plan.
But what if the lions might get Hancock poisoning, and I that would be cruel.
Yeah, that would be wrong. They're probably too good for even. They probably wouldn't even want to go near him. Yeah, I know. Look, what can I say? It's not great at the moment. Mainly, as I said, because people legitimised the very, very first lockdown, which you should never do. And all the papers are completely signed on to this. They're a disgrace.
So we can't really bring that much cheer to people in
No.
2021. Well, I will say, Laura, I had a very Delingpole Christmas in which basically we just went fuck off to all the regulations. We had loads of family members round. We just carried on as normal. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah, and
because luckily, thank God, my children are on side.
Yeah, that is good. That is good. I mean, yeah. But you're out there in the country, aren't you? No, I mean that's the thing, is that it's very rare where everybody's, singing from the same hymn sheet.
I've seen so many families divided by this.
Yeah.
I mean, that was another diabolical thing that they've managed to do.
Yes.
They managed to ruin Christmas for so many people by creating this division within families, ranging from those who believe the government propaganda, who think that you can't wear a mask often enough, to those at my end and your end of the spectrum, where we just think this is nonsense. Yeah. So how are you going to get reconciliation between those families? It's going to be it's like our Civil War. It's like the English Civil War.
No, it is literally diabolical. I mean, it's as he said, it's dark forces, and I think it's directly proportionate to how much mainstream media people take in. I mean, if it wasn't that, they wouldn't know anybody who had COVID. Well, I know somebody, but he's fine. They certainly wouldn't know anybody who's died from it. No. Or at least very few.
I still don't.
I mean, it's only the 24-hour media cycle and the internet. I don't think they could have done this without that. Because people just wouldn't feel. Remember, Sage said we need people to feel sufficiently threatened. If this happened again, in the 50s and 60s, when you just didn't have the constant news cycle, when it was only the 6 o'clock news, the 9 o'clock news in the papers, it couldn't terrify people enough. But the 24-hour
By the way,
and the social media have enabled it.
I know of lots of people who've died of COVID. I've heard through friends, and in every single case, it's always gone like this. My dad, my relative, my friend on the estate, had COVID written on their death certificate when I know for an absolute fact they died of something else. Those are the people I know died of COVID. In other words, they didn't die of COVID. It was just put on their death certificate. I've heard this probably of about 10 people. I've heard that. So it does make you wonder about these statistics.
But again, it is sort of. I mean, I don't want to be. It is those willing architects, isn't it? Well, why are the doctors signing the certificate like that? Again, because it would take their tiny amount of courage to say, I'm not putting this on a death certificate anymore. I reject this whole 28 days of COVID. That might cost them their job, and it's just too. But every little, as you say, what would you say? Every time you conform to the system, every brick, it all goes into the greater scheme of oppression, essentially. So all the doctors have to say is, no, we're not doing the 28-day thing. I'm not putting COVID on a certificate until you tell me. And why are people complying and administering these tests to people who are fine? Again, that's an entire architect that they've managed to structure, that they have managed to build by ordinary people going along with testing healthy people, and then them saying that feeds directly into lockdowns, because then they can say, oh, well, 41,000 people have tested positive today out of a caseload of 35,000 people, probably. They've tested 35,000 and we have 41,000 positive tests. I mean, people will believe anything.
In 2020, so many people have failed the due test that we always used to ask ourselves, where in the years after the war, would I have sheltered Jews? Would I have, or would I have turned away, or what would it have been like au revoir les enfants, where they get sheltered, or would I have just washed my hands of it? And the difference is between now and early 1940s is that you don't even get your fingernails pulled out and your family shot for sheltering the Jews. All you need to do the right thing is be okay. So it might damage your career, but the cost of doing the right thing is much smaller than it was back then. And even then, people have failed. They lack courage. They lack moral courage and lack physical courage.
Yeah, I know. I mean, exactly. And all these tiny decisions, as you say, are all go along with this government machine to essentially prolong this lockdown as long as possible. Every signature on a death certificate that isn't COVID-19, that goes down as COVID-19, is basically facilitating this impression. Every person who administers a stupid COVID test to someone who isn't, who isn't symptomatic, everybody, who the hell takes them? Well, why?
I know. Who are these people that went on Christmas Day? What kind of idiot? Well, I know some people in my family have done the stupid thing. They actually got tested. Why? It's like saying, "Oh, I've got a sniffle. I better go and see whether I've got a cold."
I don't, and I mean, people say, "Oh, it's not a false comparison." You know, those poor Jews. You know, it's completely wrong to make a comparison. No, because it was all sold on the example the Jews are dangerous. They're a threat to your safety. So now, instead of the government making it just a small group of people who are a threat to your safety, we're all a threat. We're all a threat. So this is actually even worse. Well, you know, in terms of we're all a threat. So it is the same. Nobody comes along and says, can you do something unethical for the laugh? They normally always set up because it's a threat, because this will avoid a much greater danger, you know. So it's exactly the same thing. They're all cowards. They should stop going along with it. There's my husband.
Yes, well, okay.
I have to go.
And my wife is you absolutely have to. Quite right to. But so let's wish everyone a happy New Year, and let's hope it's a good one without any tears. Yeah.
There's going to be
anyway
a lot of tears. Yeah, I know. Yeah, oh God.
Good. No, don't say that. Don't say that. We're gonna fight.
Yeah, I suppose. That's true.
Revolution.
True. Yeah, that's true. Well,
all right. Happy New Year, Laura.
Yeah, hopefully they'll keep the schools open.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Bye.
Take it easy, James. Bye.